Okay, folks, so we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I will be your friendly dungeon muser this afternoon or this evening or this morning, wherever this finds you, whenever this finds you. Today, so we had a weekend where we had two scheduled sessions that did not go forward as originally scheduled, so I thought I'd hop on and provide a context for what happened with those, and also I realized the time of year that it was time probably for another channel update. I used to do, prior to the current COVID crisis, I used to do regular quarterly updates, and kind of fell out of the habit of doing that. So this gives me an excuse to provide that as well, too. March 2020, at the time of recording, it's March 27, 2022, and it'll provide a good excuse to do a State of the Union on the channel as well. So that's what we're here to do today. Let me just quickly refresh my monitoring thing here, make sure that stream is live. It does appear to be. Good. So, what I want to do is I'm going to try and keep this one short. I know I say that at the start of every one of these channel update videos, and then it runs for 3 hours, but I am going to try and keep this one to a very short thing, for one, to make respectful use of your time, and also because I don't have an awful lot I really want to say about any of these things. That's always my intent with these videos, but we will see. In terms of the state, let's maybe start with the State of the Union, then we'll talk about some specific games in general, and then I'll talk a bit about the plans for the future. So, first thing, let's talk about the ongoing campaigns that we have, including we'll start off with probably what is the one that is, well, I mean, it's certainly the game that has the most sessions behind it, for sure, and that is our ongoing campaign playing Carl Sargent's awesome Night Below campaign. We have played the vast majority of that campaign using Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, but have, for the last 3 months, almost 4 months, last 13 or 14 sessions, been using Pathfinder 2nd Edition from Paizo Publishing to tell a war story for it. And for one, I will say that I am enormously grateful for the reception that our war story has received from not only from the fans who have been watching us for all this time, and their willingness to let us tell a story with a different set of rules that we think, or as I thought was different. I also want to thank the players as well for really embracing that and learning the system and learning to play with gusto and respecting that. I felt that this particular story was going to be better told with that set of rules than with the ones we have been using for AD&D 2nd Edition. That said, we are going back to AD&D 2nd Edition when we return to the present. We have, I believe, one more part in this war story, one more session. It'll make it 14 chapters in total, and then we'll be returning to our modern-day game with the players having their experience informed by what happened, and as well as to gain some experience points as well, too, to reflect the time that we spent playing. That didn't see them advance in that. That war story has been some of my favorite sessions with that particular campaign. There's been a lot that I've loved about it, but I really do. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is one of my absolute favorites to write for, and to run, and it's been just an enormous amount of fun seeing these characters and these players going through with a game that I enjoy and love so much. We also have continued on with our Legacy of the Crystal Shard campaign, also played with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. That one, we are up to our, I think, the 80s in the session. We're certainly into our second overall year of play with that campaign, which is shocking, because, I mean, that was started originally as a time filler for our for the start of the pandemic, and then just sort of evolved into its own thing. That game, likewise, has been going strong. We've added a new player to that one, and it's been great. I mean, I'm very excited for where that game is going as well. I've got an enormous amount of stuff written for that, and we're regularly able to have sessions on those Saturday mornings, so that's also been a shit ton of fun. In the last about 2 months or so, we've also been playing on Friday nights. Our regular game is Starfinder, the science fantasy RPG from Paizo Publishing. We have been playing through the Attack of the Swarm adventure path. We completed the first module recently, and then we had been for 2 weeks. We've been intending on kicking off the next leg of that campaign, but just because of things coming up in players' lives and the player pool for that one being a little smaller, we have not been able to continue on. But we expect next week to be able to be diving back into that campaign. That adventure, I don't want to speak for the players, but they seem to share my opinion that is one of the best modules I've ever run. That first adventure in Attack of the Swarm, Fate of the Fifth, is just an enormous amount of fun to run. It tries to capture, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who may want to watch the series or may want to play that adventure, but it tries to capture the feel, the desperation, and the ticking clock aspect of facing an invasion of your planet by someone else and then being evacuated, elsewhere, or trying to escape elsewhere while everything's kind of falling down around you. And in light of current events in Ukraine, we did postpone one session, or we just didn't feel like it was appropriate to be running that type of adventure during the time. But the adventure itself is just awesome, like one of the very best I've read, and it's one of the few modules that I've run specifically as written as well. I made one, I think maybe one small change, two small changes to things, one to in the overall course of the module, and one just to add an extra scene in, and it's just great. So if you are interested in picking up Pathfinder. Starfinder. If you're interested in trying Starfinder and that kind of military sci-fi vibe appeals to you, kind of an Aliens or Starship Troopers, or less fascistic than Starship Troopers, but that type of thing appeals to you. All you need in order to run that module is the core, assuming you're not going to run stuff off of, the stuff on the archives of Nethys, or whatever the Starfinder equivalent is, where you're getting everything from online. If you're like me and you like having the print versions of everything, the core rulebook and the Alien Archive 1 and 2 are everything you need to run the first 6 modules. You can add in stuff. Oh, and the armory. The armory is also kind of necessary because there's stuff in there. So anyway, but again, all of that stuff can be found online. You can for free online. They have in cooperation with Paizo, they have all that online. So if you are interested in trying Starfinder, the core rulebook and the module itself is really all you need. You can find everything else online, and it's just a great introduction. My favorite introduction to the game of the 3 introductory modules I've run so far, and of the ones I've read. It's just a great adventure. Another ongoing campaign, we're 6 sessions in now, is Cult Divinity Lost, which is played on our Sundays. Alternate Sundays. Cult Divinity Lost is a horror game that is, the game mechanics are much more in the story game kind of arena, but the core mechanics of Cult are much closer to a standard game, which fits closer to what I am comfortable with running and comfortable with playing. It's one of my favorite games I've run over the last couple of years as well. Just a really great game, and I love seeing the reaction of players when they play it as well too. The players who have not played something like this before, who are thrown in and dive in and play, get to experience what Cult is like. It's quite awesome. It's like I mentioned to a friend today that I really enjoyed the watching. I stumbled across the reaction video genre of things where people are hearing songs they never heard before, and seeing some of my favorites from back when I was a kid, and seeing people react to them the same way I did when I first heard those songs is really quite awesome. It's a very heartening thing, and it's a similar thing with Cult. It's really offers such a unique experience, and I think different from other Powered by the Apocalypse or story game, type games. It's just been a phenomenal campaign, and we have had we drift between about 2 and 3 players in that right now, and I'll talk more about that a little later. But it's a game that really, you can have a great 3-hour session with one player. You certainly can have more players as well too, but it's just that kind of game where it doesn't hinge on like a bad combat outcome or a bad whatever else. It's just the nature of the game, and having the conversation to see where the story goes is just it's so different. And for those who maybe old school fans who are not familiar with story games, or not familiar with them at least enough to see them in play, there's a game going on there. Like, don't make no mistake, there is an actual game you're playing. It's not that you're just having a conversation and rolling dice and there's no correlation between the two. It's just it's a different way of interacting with the story and with the fiction, and it results in a different experience. So the gameplay is just very different. There still are, in this game at least, things you would recognize as what you would expect to see in a role-playing game, I think, if you're coming from a more traditional standpoint. But I will give a content warning for it. The content in Cult is quite extreme, but there is, or can be extreme, but you do not have to include that content, and the game is express that you find what level of content you want to include in it. It is a different thing from the sort of Lovecraftian type horror, and I think is closer. Honestly, the thing that really clicked for me was, I've not read the short story or the novel or whatever it is, but The Outsider. It was an HBO series that was on recently with I think Jason Bateman was in it, and it was a. It featured just like it's one of those like normal life, and something really bizarre happens, and then the characters over the course of the stories learn more and more bizarre truth behind this, as is often the case with Stephen King type stuff. And I feel like that's the kind of story you can really tell well with Cult, but you can also tell a variety of other kind of modern non-Lovecraftian horror stuff. It's a long way of saying that even though that this gameplay is very different from, I think, what you think of as traditional play, I think you would recognize much of what the actual game is in there, and you may find that this is a really a great way to experience a story game type of thing that these like modern games talk about, or modern game designers and a lot of modern players talk about, without having to go to like a Power by the Apocalypse style thing where you're doing, you have a move sheet and the action is abstracted so much from what you were used to in a traditional round per round, take an action, roll dice, see consequence type thing. A really terrific game. I really can't say enough good things about it. And the last, let's see, we also have on our alternate Sundays when we're not playing that, we are back playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Playing in my Spires of Paradar setting that I came up with over the holidays. That was a creation of necessity, and I've shot a whole video about talking about Spires of Paradar, so I won't belabor more about that here, other than to say I absolutely love the marriage of game mechanics and setting and story in that campaign. I'm fortunate to have just a terrific group of players to play with, and everyone seems to really get the vibe that we're going for in that, and I absolutely love the structure. I call it, honestly, my Doctor Who structure, because that's really what I was watching a lot of. I was blazing my way through the Tom Baker era, the Fourth Doctor series, when I was running that and writing it, and I love the started the uncovering mystery with action going on and weird stuff, and interesting supporting characters that are introduced and may never be seen again once that story is concluded. I absolutely love that game. It's an enormous amount of fun to write for, to run, and it really has opened my eyes for other possibilities with Pathfinder 2, and honestly with other games that I did not appreciate before. In addition, the last ongoing game we have had has been our 3-year-old Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game. This is one of the first games first campaigns that saw a lot of folks come to the channel as players that I did not know before. And there was a point where we had 8 or 9 players in it over the last 3 months or so. To be honest, over the last 6 months, that's dwindled down to about 4 players. And then that of those, it's been difficult because of life circumstances, because of changes in everyone's sort of personal lives. That has reached a point where we often find it challenging to run a session of that, or just impossible to run a session of that. The reason we didn't have a session this weekend is because on Friday I wrote to the players in that game and circulated my thoughts on where the game was and the reasons I thought that the game should go on hiatus. I think that in broad strokes, the reason I think that was a challenge, for one, the game itself, because it's an old school game and because it's a very combat heavy campaign, it is very challenging to run that style of game with a smaller group. Now, there are absolutely, just to forestall any kind of, backseat drivers in the back, I've been running old school games in the last 3 years for over 400 sessions. So I'm familiar with the challenges and how to get around those difficulties. So while I appreciate that you may have your own thoughts on what could have been done to adjust the game or change it to accommodate a smaller group, I am mindful of those, and we have chosen not to make use of those things. So I'm not really interested in suggestions for what we could have done differently. This has been a decision that's made with the players as well. And it just felt like at the time, given the challenges that we were having with it and the fact that sometimes we just did not have enough people to even play a session with a limited number, that game's going to go on hiatus. What I expect is going to happen is when 3rd edition Hyperborea, the 3rd edition of this game, arrives, I'm going to see a new flush of interest on my part in that game, because that's usually what happens when new editions can come out. The new edition does look really good, and I'm not committing one way or the other whether we will be coming back to this campaign at some point, but I definitely will be revisiting the possibility of it then. I have enormously enjoyed playing with everybody who has played in that game, and one of the reasons why I circulated an email to all the players to make sure that they understood that the reason for wanting to or suggesting a hiatus for the game was not because I didn't enjoy playing with the players. I love playing with those guys. It's a great group of players. I am fortunate to have played for 3 years with so many gifted role players and generous in their contributions and in the way they present their characters and their willingness to go with all those changes and whatnot we saw in that campaign over time. So I am deeply appreciative of that, and for the fans that campaign has had. We have people who regularly check in every week to let us know that they were watching and whatnot, and we deeply appreciate you as well. This is not a light thing, to set, especially for having so long behind this game, but the longevity of a game is not really a reason to keep it going. A game needs to have its own justification for the campaign keep going. And if the circumstances are such that we cannot really run the game as we intend it to run, then it's better to set that aside in favor of something new rather than to continue it along, particularly when I can speak only for myself. Like, one of the things that regular viewers of the channel will know that I hate wasting time on when we have gaming time set aside. And because I so regularly didn't plan for contingencies for that, when we found ourselves down, I often didn't have anything in place to run instead. So to make valuable use of the time that the players had set aside for that. But I also found myself progressively getting less engaged in planning for it. I thought about the campaign less. I would spend less time working on it because when there's a chance that the campaign that the session is not going to go forward anyway, it's hard to put that work in. Unless it's got its own thing where you're trying to get the game to the table and run it. It's hard. So rather than letting those feelings increase and being mindful that we're just not being able to play what we had intended to play with the game, it's going on hiatus, and it's an indefinite hiatus. I don't know whether the game's going to come back. We'll see where things are when the new game comes out. The other thing I'll say as well is that where I am as a DM in my headspace now, 3 years later, January 2019 is when we kicked this campaign off. And at the time, I just that was right at my the inception of my exploration of the old school again, of getting back into old school games and running a lot of old school games. And regular viewers will know I'm a perennial house ruler, and I also like running a lot of different games. But I am also really. I deeply enjoy the long-term campaign, the kind of emergent gameplay that comes from those long-term campaigns. So again, it's not a light decision to set this campaign aside. George, one of our players from that, pointed out that his son was born within days of the start of that campaign. So it's sort of been a continuity through his son Darwin's life as well, which is great. I mean, it speaks volumes to the added, to having something like an ongoing campaign like that in your life. I know it's been this case for me. Like it's been a regular presence in my life for 3 years. But I mean, you got to recognize what over time what that regular presence represents at a certain point. When you change, over time. And circumstances change for everyone else. So because of that, that's where we are. We did not, unfortunately, tie up the campaign in a specific story thing. We didn't conclude at a certain point, so we're sort of leaving things in medias res. But our primary goal with this channel has always been to just run games the way we run games, as if it was just us. There isn't a performative component to what we're doing here. So while we love, and don't get me wrong, I love the audience participation with, on live streams, the people we've met through the Discord server, through email, through whatever else. It's been phenomenal getting to meet the community that's grown around the Dungeon Musings community in general from the Ash game. And Ash is also, don't get me wrong, is a terrific game. Just that my sensibilities, I think, are also probably elsewhere now from where that game was, or at the time we started playing this. So, for all those reasons, we're saying goodbye to Ash for the time being on the channel, and then we'll be revisiting that likely at some point later on. I will say a huge thank you as well. Jeff Talanian has been very generous in our gaming marathon from 3 years ago, 2019, before the pandemic. I ran Ash as the game for all my friends back home. Something we do every year on the channel. What we used to do prior to the pandemic, get everyone together and we all play a 16-hour session of a game. And Jeff very generously sent over a bunch of character folios, for us. So a huge thank you to Jeff for the ways that he's also let me use the logo, the Hyperborea logo on some of the stuff that I have used to promote the game. So I'm really appreciative of the support that he's shown for the game. I got a great DM shirt as well, too. He sent me a DM shirt for it too. So Jeff, I really appreciate this. I'm really looking forward to 3rd edition as well, and I still think that Ash stands among one of the very, very, very best old school games of anything I have run. So that is that's where things go. This big beauty is going to be going back on the shelf for a while, and will not likely be drawn off anytime soon. There's been 2 other games. One of the things that's been unusual for the last 3 months has been that there hasn't been a lot of filler games or charity games. The charity games have been, in the first 3 months of the year, have not been happening, largely because we didn't have a way of accepting donations for SOS Children's Villages International charities, the charity that benefits from our Heroes Save Villages campaign. I will say that last year, our community raised over $4,000 before the thing was shut down because of change of service provider that SOS Children's Villages International was using. And that is mind-blowing. Second year of a pandemic, and our gaming community raised over $4,000. I was actually recognized as one of the star volunteers because of that campaign by the organization. And that is a recognition for the generosity of you folks, of the people in the community who've supported that initiative. I will offer once again a huge thank you to our partners for the raffle for that. Beetle and Grimm's Pandemonium Warehouse has been fantastic for 3 years now. For the 3 years we've been running the charity raffles, being staggeringly generous in their support by supplying gifts and whatnot. In addition to all the other, Noble Knight Games has been very generous in their support as well. J.M. DeFogie, the author of Jackals, offered up some content for our last raffle as well too. So huge thanks to J.M. And I'm going to forget a whole bunch of people. There's been members of the community who have donated stuff, members of the player base who have donated stuff. So I'm very happy that is now back up and running. We're already at like 800 or 900 in the past couple of weeks that we've raised. And we have our next charity raffle scheduled for June 1st, 2022. And we have, we're in the process of getting our first charity session set up. So I'll talk about that in a moment as well. The other 2 games that we played on the channel are, I ran a one-shot of DC Heroes 2nd Edition, which was a lot of fun. This game is another one of those ones from my childhood that I read the shit out of, and it's a weird animal. Like, it's not the game that I would use for every superheroes thing, nor I'm not sure it would be my go-to for superhero stuff, but it was on a huge amount of fun to run a one-shot for Carl and Jeff, where they played Superman and Dr. Fate, respectively. It was a really fun time. And the other thing we've run this past week as part of our, to be honest, I've been framing it as our celebration of the 30th anniversary of the release of this game. But to be honest, it's that I finally got a copy after 30 years. And that would be Gary Gygax's 1992 game, Dangerous Journeys Mythos. There's the 2 core books, Mythos and Mythos Magic. This game has a bit of a notorious history to it. At the time of release, it got sued out of existence really before it could have a chance to establish itself in the marketplace. It was published by Game Designers Workshop, GDW, at the time a mid-level publisher, but certainly I think on tier or on par with where FASA was, where White Wolf was, where because at the time White Wolf, let's see here, Shadowrun was in its 2nd edition. Shadowrun was in its 1st edition in 92. The White Wolf had only just released Werewolf the Apocalypse. AD&D had just released the Dark Sun box set a year earlier. Planescape was still in the future. The Star Wars RPG from West End was in its 2nd edition. So it's this really... West End Games was obviously a big publisher at the time as well. It was a big part of... and there's a big build-up to its release, and then within 2 years of this thing's release, GDW was non-existent anymore. If you're not familiar with Game Designers Workshop or GDW, they were the ones who published Twilight 2000 and Traveler of the New Era and Dark Conspiracy and 2300 AD, and Mega Traveler prior to Traveler of the New Era. Traveler of the New Era is just a contemporary game of Dark Conspiracy, of Dangerous Journeys. That's why it makes me think of it, because GDW would routinely release their games in these great, big, fat, softback formats, these like 400-page books, as opposed to the hardbacks that a lot of other publishers put out. GDW also had not in-house, because they also published for other games, but they had a kind of a like multi-publisher version of Dungeon Magazine called Challenge that would release adventures for a wide variety of different adventures for different publishers. So like if you happen to enjoy like FASA's Star Trek, or Star Wars from West End, or any of GDW's games, or Call of Cthulhu for that matter. Chaosium obviously was a publisher at that point too. Challenge Magazine might have adventures for any one of those games in it, which is super fucking cool. If you purchased Dungeon Magazine, you're only getting TSR branded stuff, so you might get adventures for Top Secret or AD&D or Marvel Superheroes for the Marvel file, although that was in Dragon, not in Dungeon. So you had it was a neat thing for someone who had not grown beyond, but has looked beyond AD&D at the time and started playing other games. Challenge Magazine was amazing, and this game was promoted extraordinarily heavily. There were so many pictures, and I mean, you had these awesome Larry Elmore covers to it. And then the game came out and then disappeared. I never got a chance to actually get the copy of the game, so the only thing I knew was through reputation and through reviews. And the reputation and reviews of the game were that it was a mess. It was unplayable, and it was effectively that Gygax had sort of lost his mind. And the game was developed, I've subsequently learned the game was developed between 1986 and 1992, so 6 years of really intense development that Gygax apparently played it quite a bit with his family and friends and whatnot to cultivate a game that he wanted to call Dangerous Dimensions in a setting called Unhallowed. And then when he got into the arrangement with GDW to publish it, it was advertised at one point as Dangerous Dimensions and then changed to Dangerous Journeys because of the pending lawsuit. And I finally got this thing, and there's a lot of games over the course of my lifetime where I've had white whales that I've never got a chance to play as a kid, but got them, and they were like, okay, this is pretty interesting, I've yet to encounter something in my lifetime that I have quite so obsessively got into once I got the game. I am planning a comprehensive overview of the game, and I've run 3 sessions of it so far. I've been reading this thing obsessively for 2 weeks, and coming up with some house rules for play. And I intend to be running more of it on the channel in the future, not as an ongoing campaign, but I think as more of our go-to pickup. Only because I don't know where in the schedule I'd fit it yet. But what I can say in general, that my impression right now is that the game has an enormous amount of complexity to it, and some of that is because of the nature of the game, and some of it is by virtue of the fact that Gygax made every effort to change any nomenclature or naming convention of any kind that related to AD&D or D&D to try and avoid getting having the game sued out of existence, which is what happened. But the thing that I find, having taken a deep dive into it, it is complicated. There is some cumbersome nomenclature that takes getting used to. But being a child of the, a gamer of the 80s and a player in the 90s as well, and then continued RPG fan, like, the level of complexity in this is not deserved, in particular given the complexity of contemporary games like Rollmaster, like Hero System, like GURPS, like Aftermath. One of my friends pointed that out when we were talking about Dangerous Journeys. Like, there's a lot of very complex games that were out at the time, some of which were Bushido is a very complex game. Games that were complex for the sake of complexity in some cases, and games because they just the design that the creators had in mind are just really different. Like, they're just they required a level of complexity that just is not tenable at the table for every group, or for a lot of groups. Nowadays, because of the idea that to make games more accessible, the way we do that is by making them more streamlined and more simplified. And I don't disagree with that to a degree, because there's a lot of people who that the games will bounce off of. You need to have those for the hobby to survive, especially to attract casual players and have a good player base of people who like playing RPGs. You need to have games that are like that are accessible. However, I think of this, and this is a terrible analogy because everyone always goes to this fucking analogy in video games when they want to think of it, but I think of it like Dark Souls. Dark Souls and having played Elden Ring quite a bit lately, the game is not... Elden Ring is more forgiving than some of the other ones. Bloodborne is a little more forgiving than some of the other ones. But like those games are... they have a level of complexity to them and difficulty that requires you to learn them in order to properly enjoy them. There are a lot of RPGs, modern and otherwise, that are awfully like that as well. And this is definitely one of those games. It is one of those games where, in part because of certain other things, because of the nomenclature so unusual, that it sometimes can be off-putting. But in the right hands, I think that you can teach this game to anyone who has the patience to learn it, I should say. For some, it's just like they will think this is not worth the effort. And I think at its core, there is a very, very good game in this game. And more to the point, it is a fascinating artifact of the RPG historic record for where Gygax's design sensibilities were from 86 to 92. In particular, the ways that this game, not in the sense of like, I want to do things differently for the sake of doing things differently, but the way he talks about what the play experience is going to be like and the certain kinds of rules that he has in it are so different from the instructions and the guidelines that you get in AD&D First Edition and in the, his responses to letters, his articles and things about what D&D is. And I think that for people who are interested in knowing where his mind was, and I don't purport to know him whatsoever, I don't purport to have any primary sources from him other than the articles he wrote in Journeys magazine about this, and then what he writes about in the game itself. I'd be very interested to know about people who lived through that and knew what his mindset was. But the game that we have here, and the way he talks about many core aspects that a lot of folks, I think, assume are core tenets of Gygaxian realism, it is fascinating to me to see the game that he puts out in this. The game in this is a person who is in a very different, and I think for folks who learn the game, a shockingly modern sensibility. Some ideas in it are way ahead of where we see game design going in more modern games and more modern sensibilities for games. So it is, in that sense alone, it's also just a really, really interesting game to think of how different a place that he was as a designer and the type of play experience he was trying to encourage at the table, and how different that is from his thoughts on AD&D, which is great. I mean, it's amazing to me that a designer can create two so different products. And I guess the reason that's what my understanding of the game is right now, and I feel that the contemporaneous reviews that I read about this, I think were either ill-informed because they did not actually try and run the game, ill-intentioned because it was just a popular way to dogpile on a guy who had been shit-canned by TSR. And at the time, there was a feeling in the at least with the people that I played with, where like it was still pursuing the next big thing. Dark Sun was the hotness, Spelljammer was the hotness, second edition, and the kits books, those were the fucking cool things, not playing old school modules from first edition. There were people who did that, but that was not what was driving sales at TSR because they didn't care. So that was the sensibility, of where the game was and where a lot of us were at the time. And I think it is I think I will say as well, the game is very much, I can't remember if Gygax was born in the 30s or the 40s, but whatever he's a boomer, and the game is very much a boomer trying, writing a game that's 30 years old, starting in the mid-80s and going forward. So there are some, because the setting is an ersatz or mystical version of Earth, there are some very unfortunate cultural things that are in there that may themselves be off-putting for people who can actually track down copies of the game. So there's also a side issue with that, but I'm going to set all that stuff aside to just focus on the actual game itself. And I feel like that dogpiling. Oh, that's what I was saying. The because people were embracing the new hotness, Gygax felt like a bygone thing, or at least was treated as such. There wasn't the reverence for Gary Gygax that we see post-release of third edition. It was seen as the old way of doing things, and like, why do that when you can do the cool new way? So I feel like the place he had in the gaming space, it was like seeing a fallen icon. So it was also very easy for people to dogpile on with that. Do I think that Dangerous Journeys is a game for everybody? Absolutely fucking not. Do I think it's a way of, it would have served as a good way of welcoming people into the hobby? Probably not. It's a lot. It definitely needed an editor to take a second pass through the game. But what I was expecting, based on the reviews I'd read, was a game that was incomprehensible, that was contradictory, that did not have a fundamental, thing. Because there's lots of elements of AD&D where that works that way too, where like there's gaps in like how you're supposed to roll initiative, how you make use of weapon speed and stuff like that. Like there's just some weird holes in AD&D that are just glossed over by people who want to lionize that version of the game beyond just being a game design, developed by a talented developer. Dangerous Journeys, I think, suffers from being a very inaccessible in the sense of you cannot buy legal PDFs of it. If you do a search for it, you can find PDFs of the 2 core rulebooks and many of the other books as well but they're not legal means of getting access to it, and it's tricky finding used copies. You can find used copies at the time of recording for about $40 or $50 US for each of them, which is consistent with old school, a lot of old school stuff is right now. But it's still even tricky to find that too. I've managed to find a handful of copies for some players who, because I really feel it's a game you need to have those copies. So you can't get it legally through PDF. You can. It's difficult tracking down used copies, and the only reviews that are out there are ones that just say it's an incomprehensible mess. With the exception of one review that does go through it and points out the complexity and concludes with, because of these reasons, it's a game I don't want to play anymore. And I think that is the fairest one that's out there. Almost everything else is presents it as just this is a mess. And I think my reason, for doing many of my overviews is to, I'm a fan of an underdog. Same reason I recorded my 2nd edition video in the first place and my 4th edition videos, because I felt that there was more to the game than what was the popular consensus on it, and I really feel that's the case with Dangerous Journeys as well. It's a game that, unfortunately, it is it's a much harder to find game, unless, again, you're doing Google searches and snagging PDFs from potentially untrustworthy sites. You cannot get a copy. And a friend rightly pointed out, a concern about it potentially becoming a gatekeeping thing. And I really don't want to present it as that, that, oh, look at this cool thing that you can't get. I think that the reason I really want to do this and want to run it on the channel more, not only because it's a really good game and it really fits my sensibilities, but also because I don't feel the record is right for what this game actually is. And in particular, when Gygax went to such lengths in the game and in the Journeys magazine articles he wrote, and he wrote a lot of them in that, the game he was trying to present there, I never see that reflected in the reviews. And whether his intentions did not match up with the outcome, that's a separate issue. But the fact that that discussion is not even in there, that the father of one of the 2 fathers, I should say, of D&D is had such an interesting and different view and tried something so bold and completely unlike, in some cases, unlike anything else that's out right now, that deserves a proper, comprehensive analysis and overview. And that's what I want to do with that. So that game has become my, I don't know, whatever the feeling of the lost cause is. That is my feelings towards that. So that is something we're going to be doing going forward as well. Before we get to talking about the charity games, I want to talk about something else too. So we have one of the things that is the nature of running the types of games that we run on the channel and the types of groups we run on the channels. A lot of times people will come and go, and we don't really make a big deal out of when people leave games for whatever reason. It's their own reasons for it, so we respect that and don't try and air laundry or whatever else about it. So if you see faces come and go, the reason we're loath to talk about that is because it's their own business. It's not our business. there is one exception to that, and regular viewers of the channel will recognize one of our long-term players from, gosh, back at least 3 years, has been Maurice Walsh. Mo, I call him Mo all the time because I'm a perennial short namer, but Mo joined us first in our Starfinder game, and then has played in a bunch of other things, including like our gaming marathons and whatnot. And Mo, as regular viewers will know, has had health issues for the entire time we've known him, and I will say that, you know, I think like a lot of us, when we play games online, you know, it's sometimes easy to just limit your knowledge of what's going on in those people's lives to what is, you know, to what your involvement is with the channel, with the gameplay. You know, you have a shared mutual interest, and you don't really get a chance to learn more about the people. And my schedule is quite busy with my day job and then maintaining the channel as well. So there is sort of, I think, a way of understanding, but it doesn't excuse the fact that I really never got a chance to get to know what. Not only Mo, but for many of our players, I'm not terribly familiar with their personal circumstances. We just don't have a lot of time to hang out and chat about things non-gaming related outside of the channel. Nor do I want to impose people on people's time to do that. The reason I mention all this stuff is because Maurice went in, we know, for a medical procedure in mid-January 2020, and we haven't heard anything from him since. We have not seen any movement on his Twitter. We haven't seen any posting on any of the other social media accounts that he has. He's not been active on LinkedIn. He's not been active on any of the other sites. I've reached out to a couple of people who know him, and they have not heard from him, know him locally. And I've heard back from one person, and they have not heard from him either. The nature of not only the pandemic, but also when you're playing with people from across the world, is you don't tend to feel the acute distance unless you can't contact them online. And we've made efforts to try and determine if Mo has passed away, and we cannot find anything to confirm that one way or the other. And emails and other messages have gone unresponded to. Again, players' reasons for leaving are always their own, and if I thought that there was some personal reason for Mo wanting to leave the channel, I would not be sharing this. But in the event that Maurice, or from his time, his involvement in the local gaming scene in the UK, if you happen to be a friend of his who he turned you onto the channel, so you watched with him, if you could please, if you know anything about Mo, about what's happening to him or what his circumstances are, if you could please contact me at dungeonmusings@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter at dungeonmusings at dungeonmusings, or you can find me on the Dungeon Musings Discord server link below. You can private message me. We're all worried about him, and we, given the length of time, it's been 2 months since we last heard from him. We are making assumptions about where things are that you don't want to do, but that are just practical. But Mo has been a big part of this channel for a number of years now, and we're all deeply worried about him. So if you do happen to know Mo either peripherally or directly in real life through your gaming group or whatnot, and you know anything about either what's happened to him or a way we can follow up, that would be greatly appreciated. We would love to hear from you. So if you haven't seen Mo on the channel lately, who has been a regular presence, that is the reason why. It's just we just don't know what has befallen him. So that is where things stand. And again, I would not be making this public if I felt that there was any other reasonable excuse for why Mo would not be online, would not be joining us for sessions. Mo is an unbelievably enthusiastic player and has been a terrific contribution for all of our sessions, willing to dive into any game that was offered, and a cornerstone of our Legacy of the Crystal Shard and our previous Tech of the whatever it is, the Aeon Empire campaign for Starfinder. So, his absence has been acutely felt by not only us, but members of the player roster, but members of the community as well. So, anyway, that is where things are. I appreciate anyone in advance. I appreciate anyone who has any news on Mo. So, thank you for that. Last thing I want to talk about is just the charity games and other potential games. So, with our Ash game going on hiatus, that does leave a Saturday morning open. And having spoken to the players who are part of the Ash campaign thus far, and potentially some other players on the roster, we have a strong contender for what we'll be playing. And instead of playing an ongoing campaign on those Saturdays, what we're going to start doing is playing fixed-length adventures. Fixed-length in the sense that they have an end, not that it's going to be like X number of sessions. As much as I really would love to jump into Dangerous Journeys, we're not going to do that for a number of reasons. If no other reason, it's really hard to get a hold of that game. And we're probably going to be playing that as our pickup games from now on. What we're thinking is our Talsorian's The Witcher RPG. Now, we've generated characters for this about 3 times, and I've only run it properly once for a very, impromptu sort of combat thing. But I love this game. I from that little bit of time we spent with it, I really love it. I love the setting from it, based on my understanding, only from the television series, the movies, and what I've read in wikis and like source books. I got a book put out for the video games. The Witcher 3 game, I've not had the patience to play through, so it's just I don't know what the stuff. I don't know what setting material is added in that. Nor have I read the books. I own the books and I own the video games. Just. Haven't got to it, but the game itself, a combination of really interesting and fun character generation, great setup for being a mystery, investigative, combat, monster hunting, intrigue kind of thing, all awesome stuff, and a solid set of rules underpinning the whole thing. This is, I think, what we're going to be giving a go for as our Saturday morning sessions. It's also a lot more forgiving for smaller groups. And yeah, so that is what we're going to do. And our first charity session for the year is likely to be a return to Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition. This is the version put out by Fantasy Flight Games. This is at least 2 of our players have requested this as their go-to charity session when I asked the players what they wanted to do. And it seems like there may have been some confusion as well too. A couple of years ago, I used to offer, for a certain level of donation, I would run a charity game for people. But for a variety of reasons, I haven't offered that for a couple of years now. It's just there were reasons why that became an untenable untenable structure for it, for how we were doing our fundraising. So my apologies for any confusion with anyone who hasn't been clear on that, but that there has not been a way of donating a certain amount to get a game that I'd run for a number of years now. So, but that's our first charity game. We intend on trying to take the same approach that we did last year for many of our charity sessions, which is that donors, in addition to getting a chance to win some cool gaming stuff, they're also going to get a chance to vote on what or spend like some of the money they donated to affect the outcome. That might be to equip heroes, that might be to structure the gameplay. This one we're probably not going to do that because it's really hard to link up something like that. This game, I was talking to a friend today about this game has the trifecta of complexity in the sense that it has an intricate setting, it has an intricate set of rules, game mechanics that drive it by, and it plays in an intricate manner. Like there's a conversation that needs to happen with each gameplay. So like it is complex, coming and going. So you need to be mindful of that stuff in order to make a one-shot tenable for players who may not be familiar with the system backwards and forwards. So We'll be talking more about the other charity sessions going forward, but that is where things stand. You know, the first couple of months of the year, we really only ran the games that we had on the regular. It was fun to get DC Heroes back to the table again. I am absolutely adoring Dangerous Journeys. I am having so much fun with that. Thank you as well to the very, very, very kind reception that those sessions have had. The feedback on those sessions we run thus far have been enormously gratifying. I really appreciate the kind words that folks have had for us, for the game, and I really appreciate the even-handedness of the comments on the game, too. You know, I was a little leery of just seeing more of that same, you know, those previous reviews are just like, oh, that game was unplayable, or that game was blah, blah, blah. And when more likely than not, that opinion was coming from reviews that I feel were uncharitable, untruthful, or just inaccurate, rather than actual experience with the game. So I really appreciate everyone who has joined us on, in particular, those who said, you know, this seems complex, but let me go along for the game, for the ride, or have even just said, this seems complex, it's not for me, but it's neat to see. All that stuff, that sort of open-minded and, self-reflective a response to a game like this, I cannot thank you enough for that. Our community has always been amazing, but I really appreciate for a game that can be seen as contentious like this one, you guys blow me away again, so I thank you so much for that. And also a thank you to the players who have taken the dive into this game with me as well. It's just a fascinating... sometimes I get a bee in my bonnet about certain games, and I am so appreciative of players and viewers who are willing to go along when I chase those things. I promise that I'll be working on the Dangerous Journeys overview, and I'm hoping to record that within the next month. As long as I can get a couple more sessions in to get the game in front of a couple more people, get their reactions, because that's been really valuable so far to hear how certain people have responded to the game. Because I'm seeing it right now through my own, set of rose-colored glasses, perhaps, and it's been great seeing how other people respond to the game in play. So, and for viewers, I should say as well, viewers seeing how people have responded. My favorite one thus far has been the person who said after watching a couple of sessions that it felt like one of those old school Nintendo games that it takes you a while to learn it, but when you learn it, it really clicks. Because I think that is what the perspective I have on the game right now. And that doesn't change the fact that the game's still not going to be for everybody. Not everyone will like it, but for those who do, I think there's a real gem in there. So anyway, with that, I'll wrap up this this overview. I'll check in with chat, see if anyone's got anything to say in chat, and then I will answer those questions. Let's see here. Hi everybody. Hey, everyone who joined in chat, thanks so much for joining me. More Barrel Maze, please. Thanks, Jeremiah. That is it. Barrel Maze is one of those games. Our best Barrel Maze, I still think, in terms of, for us, meeting mechanics with intention, has been 3rd edition. It's also been some of the most fun 3rd edition that I've run in the last little while. And Dave regularly brings it up as a game that he wants to play again. So Barrel Maze is definitely not something that has been put on the back burner indefinitely. It just, as things stand right now, to try and make... that's another one of those games that is tricky to run without, with a small group, without setting up that sort of big, follower pool. We've done that in that game, so that definitely works. But yeah. Let's see here. Any more 2D20 Conan? We actually just talked about that. We have I think that there is going to be a charity after. Our Legend of the Five Rings game. Conan 2D20 is likely to be the next game to either be one of our charity sessions or to be one of our ongoing campaigns. There's a mega adventure that just came out for it that basically sets you up as a pirate, and from a variety of reasons, I just like running a pirate campaign never appeals to me. I cannot get beyond the historical and the sort of like practical realities of what playing as a pirate would be. Viewers of the channel will know, like, I like really kind of situating our stories in a specific setting and thinking, like, asking about what characters are thinking, and I frankly I'm not interested in learning what pirates are thinking. Unless there's some other twist to the structure for it, I can't get away from the idea of it being just bullies and thieves going out doing that shit. So I know it's just, it's one of my hang-ups as a player and as a DM. I hate playing pirate campaigns as well. But that's just that mega adventure doesn't appeal to me. But there's a new one coming out called Shadow of the Sorcerer that looks fucking awesome. Like, there's globe trotting in the Hyborian world. There's a variety of different great stuff in there. It touches on some of the things that I've included in previous adventures that I've written that I really enjoy. So not only is there definitely an opportunity, or there's going to be a chance for us to play more one-shots of Conan, there is definitely going to be a possibility of a short-term campaign using Conan as well, too. I still love that game, and I love the new products that have come out for it. So thanks for that question. Barrel Maze rules so hard. Thanks, Arthur. When did this? Oh, sorry, Wayne. Yeah, this wasn't scheduled, so my apologies for not being there. Lord Zordran, thank you so much for understanding of the Saturday games too. That's and I think it speaks to, honestly, like, part of the reason we run things the way we do on the channel, where like there's no editing and whatever else too, is because this is, what you get here is what our table experience would be like as well. And that is just, unfortunately, one of the things that happens with your table games too. Sometimes table games fall apart, for a variety of different reasons, but that's the way things go. So it is, we, live by the sword, die by the sword. If we run our games like that, is unfortunately sometimes that they fall victim to that sort of circumstance as well. Yeah. So Arthur, a good question about Cyborg Commando. So Cyborg Commando, when I looked into it, I've heard people say that Cyborg Commando was the first game that Gygax designed, but if you look into it further, his name's not on the box. And it seems more like he had a rough idea for the game, and then it was Kim Mohan and Frank Menser who actually did the final passes and actually brought that game together. Dangerous Journeys is his first full. There is another guy's name, Dave Newton, who's on it, but honestly, I mean, if you think of if you read the articles in Journeys magazine, whatever involvement Dave had in it, I think, was polishing the house-ruled game that Gary put together into Dangerous Journeys, rather than being a co-author in the same way that I honestly know nothing else about Dave Newton. So if Dave, if you're out there and I have us totally fucking wrong, please correct me in the comments or contact me. I would love to hear what your perspective was on this game. I know Lester Smith was the editor on it, but I believe that Lester actually passed away recently. Lester Smith was also the designer of the Dark Conspiracy and was heavily involved with GDW, and by all accounts, a really, really terrific guy. George worked with him in his time at West End Games and has nothing but great things to say about him. So, though I could be wrong about the level of involvement, but I do know that Cyber Commando, it has his name associated with it, but I don't know if he has the singular authorial perspective on that it does in this. I also don't have a copy of Cyber Commando, so I have no idea. That is another one of those games that has a reputation of being unplayable and blah blah blah. So having dived into Dangerous Journeys now, I will now take that with a grain of salt. But that's a long way of saying I don't know, but hopefully that gives you a context of why I don't know. Let's see here. Let me start on the Arthur. Absolutely, the critique of 4E. I know it's just disingenuous critiques of games. They irk me so much that I'm privileged to have the platform here to be able to put out my own videos to try and correct the record, as it were. Oh, John, yeah, thanks. DJ, great to hear it has a home. Yeah, thanks so much. I know we've had a couple people join who have been, I guess, Dangerous Journeys lurkers. Sorry, my dog. Okay, Anna. Anna, all right, honey. Jesus. She has fit her foot underneath my leg and the table, so I apologize for the seeming earthquake I just had there. Let's see. So that's great. Yeah, the people I've heard from who are Dangerous Journeys fans, like I said, the community we have in the Dungeon Musings community have been really welcoming, and the people who are Dangerous Journeys fans, who we've heard from the first time, have been awesome. It's been really cool hearing that there are fans of this game that are out there, and because it's impossible finding stuff online. There's almost nothing about the game online. And it's understandable because you can't legally get an electronic copy, and the physical copies, it's tricky to find those things, as tricky as finding any other out of print gaming products. So thanks so much for joining us and for the encouragement. Anna the dog want to be on TV. I think, Brian, less so she wants to be on TV, more so she wants me to go and open the door to the back so she can go and yell at people once again. So it's a beautiful day here. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us in chat as well too. That's where we stand. I am excited to wrap up our Night Below war story and then get back to the present day and see where our heroes go next in that campaign. All of our ongoing games are. I apologize as well for we've had more often than usual. We've had times where we just not run games, because I didn't have something, and I want to make sure that. That doesn't happen in future. That there's always, not only for the players, primarily, of course, my commitment is the players. They set aside the time. I want to give them something to play one way or the other. But also for you folks. If you folks have made time in your schedule to join us, I am cognizant that commitment is making use of your valuable time. So if you are joining us live, I want to make sure that you always have something. And one of the things we've talked about for our Sunday games, not for the Spires of Paradar, but what we might be doing is when we cannot get together a quorum for our cult game, we may be implementing an idea that I've had for a while, which is going to be something called Three-Headed Etten. Three-Headed Etten is my idea for sort of a chat show along the lines of I don't listen to it so much anymore, but I used to listen to this great podcast called Political Gabfest. That was just two reporters and a professor of political science, a professor of law, who would get together and chat just sort of about it was professionals in those fields who were knowledgeable about sort of the events of the day, who were having a casual conversation over drinks. It was that vibe for it, and that's what we're going to do. I can tell you that myself and Sean a couple of times have gotten together on our Sundays when we haven't played and just shot the shit, talking games and whatnot. And we talked about it today finally, and we're going to start doing those. If we do find that we're down people or whatnot, we're going to have it be a Three-Headed Etten. And we'll open the door to any other players who want to join us. So you may start seeing, in addition to the games, when we aren't able to run that, and I have not got something else prepped, or we don't want to run something else, you will still have a kind of hangout and chat session, and those may be topical. They may be, more often than not, it's just whatever we happen to be thinking about, about the games that we're running or whatnot. Or games that are out there, So hopefully that'll be something a little different from the usual actual play content or the overviews that I have. But otherwise, all those games that I mentioned, with the exception of Ash and DC Heroes, I think all of those you can look forward to seeing soon on the Dungeon Musings channel. Last thing I will say is a huge thank you to all of the players. 2022 continues to be a challenging year in a lot of different ways, not only because of the persisting effect of the ongoing crisis, not only because of the way that current events, we have viewers and fans who are in Ukraine and in Russia, and this has been an extraordinarily challenging time. That's such a pap way of putting it. I mean, my heart breaks for the people who are affected by the Ukraine war. Not only the folks there, but anyone who's tried to take a stand. When there are laws passed that are press gang you into a front line of a war that's seeing higher casualties for the Russians than all of Afghanistan. It's a level of existential terror that I have never experienced in my life, and I cannot imagine. So whatever measure of solace that our games are bringing to anybody joining us from Ukraine, supporting people from Ukraine and the surrounding countries, and anyone who has opposed this war from a Russian perspective, I'm grateful that we can offer anything to take your mind off of the what's going on at the time of recording. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody who joined me live or otherwise who've used this. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, elsewhere on the channel, my apologies again to the folks who are the fans of our Ash game. I am sorry that has come to an end, but I do hope that you will find something more to enjoy on the channel. If not, I'm really gratified to see there's a lot of more people who are picking up Ash and running it now and streaming it now. So that's great to hear. The game is definitely accessible elsewhere. If that really is the thing that drew you here. If it is some of the wonderful players we get a chance to play with, well then you will not be saying goodbye to any of them anytime soon. And we hope to have you back with some dark monster hunting adventures on the continent quite soon. I'll also mention that a big thank you again to our friends at Noble Knight Games. They've been my primary source for out-of-print games for a number of years now, and they have very generously offered us a discount code to share with you fine folks. If you purchase anything from $10 or more through their website, at checkout, enter the code Dungeon Muser, and you will save 10% on your purchase, in addition to whatever sale or whatnot they may have going on. In addition, you can find a link down below to the Heroes Save Villages campaign. That's the charity fundraising campaign on the channel. As I mentioned, we were honored to raise over $4,000 for the kids who benefit, the over 80,000 orphan and abandoned children who benefit from SOS Children's Villages International, including an ongoing emergency relief effort in Ukraine. They have villages in Ukraine that have been affected by the war. And they have an emergency program going on. You can learn more about that by following that link and learning all about SOS Children's Villages International. And for every $25 Canadian that you donate from now until June 1st, until May 31st, I suppose, you get one chance to win the grand prize or one of the other great prizes in our next charity raffle, which will be taking place on June 1st, my birthday. So we'll celebrate my birthday by giving away some great gaming prizes. The grand prize is a copy of Beadle and Grimm's Platinum Edition Wild Beyond the Witchlight. It's this really, if you haven't picked up the adventure, it's an adventure that both celebrates and kind of responds to a lot of old school stuff. It has a bunch of the characters that used to be action figures for the AD&D action figures. There's a bit of a mean-spirited joke in there about a clown called Thaco that I felt may have been an oblique shot against the old school community, but honestly, who gives a shit? Like, it's really, I think that people have made a mountain out of a molehill out of that on both sides, and I think there is more of the celebration of the old school, like gonzo stuff in that module than there is, stuff that is being mean to the old school sensibilities. But in any event, the Platinum Edition box set is $500 US at retail. They generously donated a copy for us to give away as our first prize. It has that full adventure, a bunch of extra content, a DM screen, miniatures, a map, a bunch of cool, there's wings in it because it's a fairy-focused thing. It's a gorgeous product. All of their Platinum Editions are just mind-blowing and bring so much extra stuff to your table. So I'm very grateful for them and their continued support of our charity initiatives. In addition to that, we've got a full set of the Iron Kingdom's 5th edition books that have been donated by our buddy Jeff, and Dave, our resident armorsmith, has once again donated a copy of, a chainmail dice bag. I've got some stuff that I've got, I'm going to announce closer to the time of the raffle that I'm going to kick in, as well as a bunch of stuff from the Dungeon Musings Redbubble shop, including some t-shirts, posters, mugs, some great stuff with pictures of all our favorite heroes from our favorite campaigns, or a bunch of other stuff too. The last thing I will say is once again, a big thank you to all of our players. Without players, this channel would be absolutely nowhere. It would be me talking about all the things I want to do rather than having the opportunity to play so many terrific games with so many terrific adventures, terrific players, and make so many incredible memories. And I appreciate all the viewers who have joined us in making those memories and have responded too. I love hearing people, whether you're someone who's just found the channel or someone who has been with us for a number of years. Thank you so much for your continued support. I will say once again too that it's because of your very generous support, actually, that we've been able to supply so far 7 sets of Dangerous Journeys books to our players, because again, the game is complex enough that it's easier to have those physical copies, and most of our players are old folks like me, so we want to have those physical copies copies rather than PDFs. But anyway, that'll wrap up this sort of State of the Union video. Thank you again to everybody who watched the channel for whatever reasons. And I will be back again on Wednesday with our next session, and probably the final session of our war story for Night Below. The long-delayed Fang Dragon finally showing up for session 151 of that ongoing campaign. So it may be the end of the campaign, as the characters have pointed out. The whole rest of the campaign that happened after this war story flashback may have been the delirious visions of the dying minds of all of our characters, but we'll have to see whether that's the case. Otherwise, I do hope that I've given you a couple of, well, an hour. I did keep this relatively short. An hour and 15 minutes. Take your mind off of the troubles of our world and think about not the troubles, but the opportunities and the adventures we've had on the Dungeon Musings channel. And until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, and happy gaming.